Welcome to the Success Talk Show, the podcast for ambitious leaders who want to get their best results and create a workplace for their teams to thrive. Each week, we share practical advice to help you accelerate your success and grow as an inspiring leader. Now, here's your host, Leadership Success Coach, Donna Siriani.
Welcome to another episode of the Success Talk Show. This is Donna Siriani, Leadership Success Coach and founder of Success Compass Academy. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you several tips for how you can lead change with confidence. And by change, I mean a wide range of possible changes. It could be implementing new technology. It could be that you're changing how things are getting done through a new process or procedure. It could be that you're changing how the team is organized and how they get their work done. Or it could be an organizational change. People's roles are changing, who they report to. It could also be, you're moving to a new building or a new office area. So the tips that I'm going to share with you apply to all of these examples. So let's get started. And actually, there's 7 tips. So tip number 1 is to clarify the expectations of your key stakeholders. You absolutely need to know what's motivating them to support this change or initiate it. What are they hoping that it will accomplish? It's really important that you do an in-depth interview of whoever it is that's behind the change. It could be you. Maybe you're the person who initiated it. But what results are they or you expecting to see when the change is implemented? What does success look like? How do they want to be kept in the loop and updated on progress? What are their preferences for how they'll be updated? Do they want a personal briefing? They want to meet with you on a regular basis, do it in person? Or do they simply want an email update? It will depend on the nature of the change. Now, if there are senior people who you view as stakeholders and they're not on board with this change, have you spoken with them to really understand their point of view? What do you need to do to gain their support? Now, there's probably a whole nother episode on influencing skills, but you really need to understand because you may need them to actively do something to support the effort. You may need them to provide resources or funding, and it's really important to know where they stand. You can ask them what's important to them. What are their concerns? How might this benefit them? If it doesn't benefit them, what would? Was there some change that could be made to the plan? So you really need to understand that as much as possible. Now, depending on the scope of the change and the impact on the organization, your stakeholders might actually want to be personally involved. Through this process, you'll figure out what they want and what is the best approach. So, for example, when I was Chief People Officer at a software company, I worked closely with the CEO on transforming company culture, and he was passionate about this initiative and very much involved as a key driver toward the vision. So naturally, I updated him on a regular basis, and he was involved in many, if not most of the things that we did. So you need to know for your executives or your senior leaders, your colleagues, who needs to be involved, how are you going to keep them up to date? And we'll talk more about communication in a minute. So the next tip number 2, is you need to clarify exactly what your role will be for this change. You need to think about your strengths. What do you actually bring to the table as you lead this change? Why are you the best person to lead the change? What are the expectations that others have of you? Did your boss or somebody else ask you to lead this? And what were they thinking? Why do you think they picked you? And the reason this is important is that whether it's the organization, it's a change with the team, but it's possible that you're the one with the vision and the strategy, the direction, right? And the change is something that's your brainchild. But for you to lead the change with confidence, you need to be able to clearly define what your role is from the very beginning and base it on your strengths. So, for example, if you're a big picture person, don't try to manage all of the implementation yourself. Of course, that's a recipe for disaster. Conversely, if you're highly detailed oriented, you're great at the implementation, you love rolling up your sleeves, you don't want to go it alone, right, on what the strategy is. The key to being successful here and leading with confidence is to play to your strengths. Now, if you're not sure exactly what your strengths are, but you'd like, more information on how you could do this, I encourage you to listen to the very first podcast episode, Acclimate to Accelerate Leadership Growth, where I provide tips on discovering your strengths. But the point here is you've got to be clear on your role, exactly what you're going to be doing on this change effort. So tip number 3 is after you've done that, now you need to create a team. And the people who you're going to work most closely with and collaborate with, who are part of your inner circle, your core team, you need to pick people who have complementary strengths. You need to identify the different skills or strengths you need so that they complement your contribution. So for example, if you're highly strategic, who should be on your team who's really good at execution, focus, discipline, consistency, attention to detail? Because what they contribute will complement you being very strategic. Maybe you're not as attention to detail as someone else, so you need to bring in that person. They'll complement your strategic mindset. Now, who should be on the team who's great at influencing others? Maybe somebody who's persuasive, a great communicator. They know how to take something from good to great. They love winning others over. Or who should be on your team who's really a master at building and nurturing relationships? Maybe empathy is one of their greatest strengths. And when you're managing change, you need to have someone on your team who can put themselves in someone else's shoes. They can see the change from another perspective. So you can build your own confidence and the confidence of the team when you lead the change together. What you want to do is build a well-rounded team where each member of the team is playing to their strengths. As a result, you're going to increase the probability of the change being successful. But again, it started back on the last tip with, what do you bring to the table? And now what do you need to complement your strengths with all the other team members so together as a team, you're well-rounded? So the next tip is, with this new team, one of the first things you need to do is collaborate on a detailed description of what the change will look like once it's implemented. So here's a couple of things to think about. Together, and let's say there's 5 of you. The number could be, 5 to 7 people or less. But together, you want to think about who is going to be impacted by this change. What will these individuals do differently once the change is implemented? How will they personally benefit? Or is this going to make their work more difficult? How will the organization or your clients benefit from the change? And when you think about these questions, you want to be as detailed as possible, because what you really want to do is write a vivid description, because it's a great way for people to understand what the purpose of the change is, what the benefits are going to be, what the expected outcome might be, and you collaborating with this team as a first step. And actually, it's a great opportunity to do some brainstorming, get all the ideas out on the table. Now, it's at this point that I want to recommend a book to you that I personally believe it's a must read. This is a book you absolutely need to have on your shelf. It's called Managing Transitions, Making the Most of Change by William Bridges. I used this book for several years when I was managing global client operations for a technology company, and I used this book as my inspiration and guidance when I was implementing major global changes in our organization to everything from people, process, and technology. Eventually, when I became a coach, I actually got certified in this model. It's simple but powerful, and I highly recommend it. So again, Managing Transitions, Making the Most of Change by William Bridges. But just to give you a thumbnail sketch of the model, when there's a change, there's actually 3 phases of transition that somebody will go through when there's a change. There's an ending, there's the neutral zone, and the beginning. Now, the ending is you're no longer going to do something a certain way, or the way you knew a situation, a process you followed, an environment you worked in. It's an ending. It's no longer going to exist. Then there's the neutral zone where you're really not sure exactly what the new change is going to introduce. The neutral zone can be a time of chaos, uncertainty, anxiety. So that neutral zone is also an opportunity where you can be creative and contribute to what the new vision is going to be. Then there's the third phase, which is the beginning. It's the change. It's how things are going to look going forward. So the reason why I share this 3-phased model with you at this point is that when you announce a change, You might make it effective on a certain date. Starting on this particular date, everybody is going to do things the new way. But that doesn't actually happen. It could be on that day, there are still many people who they're back at the ending. They're still doing it the old way. Or they're in the neutral zone. There's a little chaos, confusion, anxiety. They haven't quite grasped the new way of doing something, the beginning. Now, what can happen is even months, maybe even years after a change is made, you may find someone still doing it the old way. Does that ever happen? It certainly happens in the environments that I've been in. So picture a trapeze artist. The individual has both hands on a bar. They fly through the air and they grab the next bar that's hanging from above. And for a split second, they've got one hand on the first bar and the other hand on the second one. And they haven't let go of either one yet. Once they know they have a good grip, they let go of the first one and they swing to the new platform. But that can be a great analogy for these three phases. There's the ending, the neutral zone, and the beginning. And people will hang on. They're going to hang on to that first bar until they're really confident and clear that they know what the new beginning looks like. And so the reason why it's so important to create a vivid, detailed description of what life will look like when the change is implemented is because you can introduce the change, but until people really have a clear picture of what it means, how they'll do things differently, they're going to keep holding on to that first bar. They're not going to let go. So they're going to vacillate between the ending and the neutral zone. So I want to tell you a quick story. I was coaching an executive who said to me, none of the changes I've been trying to make actually stick. I'm not really sure what to do differently. And he had a very large organization, engineering, product management, at a technology company, lots of different functions. So he really had a big organization. And when we took a closer look, it was clear that when he gave his presentations, communicated with his direct reports, it was pretty high level and very strategic because those were his strengths. And everyone would listen. They thought what he was saying made sense. And they bought into it. They said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That sounds like a good direction for us to go in. But when they returned to the task at hand, they went back to their desk, continued with their work. They actually didn't have enough specificity or detail to really know what to do differently. So they just kept doing it the old way. So something can sound good in theory, but unless it's detailed and specific, you're just going to revert back to what's familiar, easy, comfortable, and what you know is successful and gets the job done. So with your change initiative, you absolutely need to paint that vivid, detailed description so that people who are impacted by the change can understand the details. Maybe it's a new step-by-step procedure, new process, new piece of technology. If they're reporting to someone else, get as detailed and granular as possible. Otherwise, people are going to stay in the ending or the neutral zone and be somewhat stuck because they're not really sure how to move forward. And I've seen this for many, many years. So you can really stand out as a leader who knows how to lead change with confidence if you tackle that piece thoroughly. So let's move on. The next tip number 5, to increase your success on this change, you absolutely need to have a written communication plan. And one of the key points to keep in mind as you create this plan is the 6 times rule. You need to communicate the change 6 times, preferably using different methods, in order for the message to stick. And you can increase your success of doing this by coming up with some creative ways. So it's not 6 times, not 6 emails, right? Or 6 presentations, but you can get really creative on ways to communicate and share information about the change. So I encourage you to have a brainstorming session with your team, this team of 5 to 7 people that you're collaborating with, to come up with ideas. Now, I've mentioned brainstorming twice. If you haven't really led a lot of brainstorming sessions lately, there is a right way to do it, a best way to do it. So be sure to watch my YouTube video, How to Lead Brainstorming Sessions. I give you some great tips there that can really help you in this situation. But let's move on. As far as ideas, those 6 different ways, you can get really creative with your team. There's so many different ways. It could be, yes, a presentation, an email. Those are pretty standard. But maybe you want to look at posters, newsletter, having a contest, doing some training. Maybe there's a demo, a lunch and learn. It could be a blog. on how the change is going, information people want. You post, some material on a blog. Maybe there's a panel discussion at an event and people learn about the change from different points of view. Or it could be that you have an open house or you conduct a webinar or do one-on-ones. So there's lots and lots of ways that you can communicate, okay? And I guarantee you that when you have the synergy of the team working on this, they will come up with great ideas, and then you're going to feel more confident with the steps you're going to be taking. Now, once you come up with these ideas for how to communicate about this change, be sure your plan includes the who, what, why, when, where, how, and why. Now, personally, I use a matrix. I've been doing it for decades. And I use a matrix and I use these elements as the column headers. And then underneath each row is a different item in the communication plan. So we already know you're going to have at least 6 items, right? But I encourage you to have a really detailed communication plan, who you're going to communicate to, what you're going to communicate, when, where, how, and why. Now, the next tip number 6, is to be sure to build feedback mechanisms into your plan. You can use a number of methods. You can send out a quick survey. You could use SurveyMonkey after key communications or key events to see how it was received. You could do an exit survey by handing out, maybe it's a little feedback form. It's anonymous, maybe at the end of an event or a meeting. So you can get feedback right away before they leave the room. Now, the difference between those two is when you send out a survey link in an email, sometimes you're lucky to get 50%. And that might even be too much, but it's really hard to chase people after the fact. So when I have a meeting or an event, I love to give out just a short little quick form, something really simple and quick for them to fill out. So before they even leave the room, you've got some feedback. And you want to invite them to give you ideas and write comments, because that could give you some important clues as to what you need to take into consideration as you manage the change. You could also conduct focus group meetings, so there's more discussion, lots of different ways that you can build feedback into your plan. But it's critical that you keep your finger on the pulse of how the change is going. How are people feeling about it? What's working? What's not working? Is there any confusion? Do people need clarity? Remember the example I just mentioned of the executive says, the change never sticks. Well, there weren't enough feedback mechanisms for people to ask questions. They really didn't know what to do differently. He thought the message was sent and delivered, and other people were just still not clear. So you need to nip that in the bud by understanding how it's being received. Now, again, I mentioned I was chief people officer at a software company. And when we were working on transforming company culture, obviously it wasn't something that one single change was going to affect. It was a steady stream of changes over time. And so we did periodic surveys, feedback all the time, a continuous flow of feedback. Now, well within our time frame, I would say it was probably within 2 years, we won a Best Place to Work award. But naturally, we knew things were going well all along the way because of that internal feedback. You absolutely need to invite people to be candid, and you want to make it as anonymous as possible, when you do your survey, so people feel comfortable being honest, okay? So building feedback into your plan is crucial. Now, the last tip I want to give you, this is tip number 7, is when you've implemented the change, be sure to share the actual results with everyone and celebrate. And I say this because, think about announcements, emails you've received about changes. Have you ever received an announcement for restructuring of the organization and it doesn't actually mention why it's happening or what the benefits will be? It's really vague. It's an explanation of the change itself, but not why or what the benefit is. So you go through weeks or maybe even months of agonizing changes without really knowing what's the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish here? So I encourage you to start off in your own communication by setting expectations up front. So this will be part of your communication plan for what the results will be, hopefully, right? Could be. And then along the way, at the very least at the end of the process, let everyone know what was actually accomplished, right? The actual results. After all this work, did we hit the target? Did we get the results we were hoping for? And you can get greater buy-in as a leader and build trust when you share that level of transparency. Now, folks, know that you've got a solid approach to implementing change. They know when they work with you and you're leading change that it's not a whim, you're not chasing some shiny new object. It's grounded in what will benefit the business. Now, the power of doing this upfront at the start of your project, obviously, is that you can then create and track success metrics all throughout the effort. This is certainly much easier when it's technology related. So for example, I mentioned when I managed global client services, we had, a steady flow of improvements and changes we would make over time. And every time we implemented a change, we were able to look at many different statistics. First time call resolution, how long a client was on hold, the number of days it took us to implement and bring a new client live, and so on, right? With lots and lots of data. But no matter what your change is about, you should be able to develop and track metrics. It could be on increasing revenue, cost savings, efficiency, productivity, client satisfaction, or some other measure. But it is a very important step. And you can lead the change with confidence when you incorporate these success metrics into your plan and use them as a valuable reality check. They will help you to confirm or validate that you're staying on track with your effort, right? That it's going in the right direction and ultimately will be successful. So those are the 7 tips. Leading change is a very big topic. And for today, I wanted to give you these 7 tips to help you lead change with confidence. Hopefully these tips have been helpful. I'm confident that if you incorporate these 7 tips into your process, that you will get better results, right? So if you found this episode helpful, I invite you to subscribe to the podcast. Simply go into iTunes and click on the subscribe button. And if you'd like more tips, go to my YouTube channel, Donna Siriani, and click on subscribe to get my weekly video. So thank you for listening and have a great day.